For more than 2,000 years, the most sacred institution of modern times has also been unveiled as the most corrupt. The Catholic Church has been rocked by sexual scandals spanning the globe. While the abuse likely went on for centuries, the paper trail really begins in the 1950s. During this time, bishops around the world referred abusive priests to church-operated treatment centers so they could receive evaluation and care without disclosing their crimes to independent clinics or law enforcement. After priests completed their treatments, they were reassigned to new parishes that had no way of knowing about their abusive past. This was the method that existed in the Catholic Church that allowed the abuse to spread to a worldwide criminal cover-up.
He took away my manhood and my childhood.
During the 1980s, victims in the US and Canada slowly began speaking out against the Church's systematic attempt to mask the corruption. Throughout the 1990s, stories emerged from victims in Argentina, Ireland, and Australia. But it was the 2002 reporting by the Boston Globe newspaper, as captured in the 2015 film Spotlight.
We've got two stories here. A story about degenerate clergy, and a story about a bunch of lawyers turning child abuse into a cottage industry. Which story do you want us to write? Because we're writing one of them.
That jolted the Church's sexual abuse into a major global story. The newspaper published over 600 articles exposing the widespread pedophilia, detailing how priests who abused children would simply be reassigned to other parishes. Many law enforcement officials were reluctant to go up against the Catholic Church, so they just turned a blind eye. But when victims did come forward to church officials, they were quietly paid off for their silence. The reporting sparked thousands of people to come forward across the U.S. and around the world. A church-commissioned report in 2004 stated that more than 4,000 Catholic priests had faced sexual abuse allegations in the last 50 years in cases involving over 10,000 children, mostly boys.
He also admitted to performing sexual acts on another youngster when aged 15. He admits the allegations for the person aged 14. He touched him on 2 occasions.
Of those 4,000 priests, only 252 were convicted of a crime, and only 100 served time in prison. Recent cases only continue to unveil how vast the issue was and still is.
I think we have made history here in Australia, the highest ranked church official to ever be brought to account for what we know was a worldwide systematic abuse of children and the concealment of that abuse.
A 5-year investigation released in 2017 uncovered that tens of thousands of children were sexually abused in Australian institutions for over 3 decades. In May 2018, Cardinal George Pell, one of the highest-ranking cardinals at the Vatican, was accused of sexual abuse. He is the most prominent official to ever face these accusations. Father Theodore McCarrick, formerly the Archbishop of Washington, D.C., also faced charges of sexual harassment and abuse, eventually causing him to step down. Most recently, in August 2018, a Pennsylvania grand jury shocked the nation when it accused more than 300 priests of sexually abusing more than 1,000 children. Currently, New York, Washington, D.C., and 11 other states are conducting their own investigations on priest pedophilia. We dreadfully await their reports. Since the issue has been brought to light, there have been 3 popes: Pope John Paul, Pope Benedict, and currently Pope Francis. While these popes have outwardly condemned the abuse, their records on handling the issue have received mixed reviews. How did this wrongdoing occur for so long in secrecy and without any consequence? We will analyze the evidence from the Catholic Church and others involved to reveal how high up the cover-up goes and who is responsible. Well, the Catholic Church situation would seem to be something kind of off base for me to be dealing with on Fox Nation. But actually, I think it's the biggest criminal conspiracy that's gone on for hundreds of years. And it's really come home to nest in the 2002 Boston Globe article. So the way I was involved from the beginning was I had a radio show in Spokane, Washington. And I was doing that radio show and actually involved with really confronting the Catholic Church in Spokane on their abuse, talking to victims, trying to talk to the church, trying to talk to the attorneys that handled cases or were trying to. And it was really a sad awakening to realize that this was one speck in a giant global scandal that mirrored each other every place it went. I have thought about doing this segment, and I have thought about all those victims that I talked to. You can see it on their face. And you can see how the church not only stole their faith, their virginity, their sexuality, they stole their hope. You're watching something disappear in somebody right in front of you as soon as you bring this subject up.
I was raped and abused when I was 12 years old. I didn't come forward with some of the abuse for 30 years. And we know that most victims are in a similar situation where they suffer alone and in the dark.
They have this veil of normalcy that is hiding what really happened to them. And we're never going to know how many victims are out there. You can go back to the 10th century. You can go back to the Magna Carta. You can go back to when the masses actually got a Bible after Gutenberg created the printing press. It's power and money. And when you look at the Catholic Church, first the Catholic Church in medieval times eliminated priests' children from inheriting their property. I mean, where would that come from? And then they realized that the women were outliving the priests, and then the women, the wives, were acquiring the property. So by eliminating the priest to be married, then the property reverts to the church. It's about money and power and the church. They're so removed from everyday normal life. Nobody's a father, a husband. Nobody has to worry about their house payment or their food. Nobody has to worry about transportation. Nobody has to worry about anything. The church takes you in, they take care of you. In 1962, the church absolutely knew that they had a real giant conspiracy, and people were coming forward because they were becoming more sophisticated as parishioners, as followers. They weren't willing to just have a priest say, go away and be quiet. So the church republished a 1922 document. It becomes the 1962 doctrine, 69 pages long. It is basically the owner's manual on a pedophile. How do you own one, transfer one, care for one, feed one, hide one, keep one from law enforcement, keep them moving, keep them in treatment centers, how you keep them in a status that they really can't be found, and you got to keep them moving. Pedophile priests usually stayed at a parish about 2 years. Normal priests would be 7 to 8 years. This is how the Boston Globe actually found their pedophile priests. They actually saw this methodology. You have to look at the hierarchy too. You have a priest. That means that the next step is bishop. Every bishop was a priest. And every priest that's going to be a bishop, once they become a bishop, they got to agree that they're going to go along with this doctrine. And we'll never know. But somebody's got to ask if you're going to go along with it before they decide to make you bishop. And once you do, you're talking directly to the Vatican that has an office that handles all these pedophiles. Like a giant game. They just shuffle them around like a giant Monopoly game. The best way to see this problem is to look at the track record and what's happened since Pope John Paul became a pope in 1978. After him was Pope Benedict, and then after him was the current pope, Pope Francis. Every one of these popes left a country that had a huge pedophile problem. The current pope left his country with 82 accused pedophile priests, but he didn't recognize the problem. When he became pope, he realized, I've never had to confront this. That's a lie. Everybody knows that he had a huge problem in Argentina, and oh yeah, Pope Benedict had a huge problem in Germany, including his brother. I want you to imagine something. Let's just put this in perspective for us mortals. You have a cop that rapes 2 children. Well, in the Catholic Church, if a priest is caught raping a child, their punishment is, we're going to defrock him, which means he gets fired. If you really want to really put the screws to him, we're going to make him have a lifetime of prayer and penance. Are you kidding me? Imagine a cop that is caught raping 2 children. He will never see sunshine again the rest of his life. Ever. And we're talking about thousands of those people that have to pray every day. That's their punishment. I was a detective in Los Angeles. It is not a predominantly Catholic area of the country. Nor would my department, nor would I recognize any religion as somebody being above the law. But we don't really understand how law enforcement dealt with this historically. It's obvious that the East Coast was the first occupied metropolitan part of our country, and it all moved west. Predominantly, when this country started, Irish Catholics were policemen. It kind of happened 1830, 1840, 1850, went forward, and so a lot of places on the East Coast, it's still that way. I'll give you an example in Boston. We wonder how 87 pedophile priests could not be caught, thousands of victims, and nobody could catch them in a town like Boston. Boston is 50% Catholics. I don't think law enforcement stood a chance no matter what they wanted to do. You have to understand the dynamics. When you start using numbers, this is what money and power is all about. In this country, there are 68 million people that declare they're Catholic. That's pretty powerful. That means in Boston or New York or New Jersey, doesn't matter where, if the Catholic Church is behind you, you're going to have 20% population Catholic, 25. The nation predominantly is 26% Catholic. Can you imagine snagging 26% of the vote wherever you are? So when a pedophile priest is caught and some good, hard-charging officer says, I don't care if I'm Catholic or not, you're going to jail. He brings him to the station, and it's a revolving door. Because once he gets there, the sergeant calls the lieutenant calls the captain calls the chief calls the councilman or the commissioner, and the revolving door, and the bishop comes and picks up the priest in the back door. They didn't stand a chance. The only way they stood a chance was when the Boston Globe came out with this, 2002. The reason the Boston Globe was so important is, inside the Boston Globe, they had an investigative group called Spotlight. And so you had these 4 reporters that all they did is pick a subject and they stayed on it. They wrote 600 articles. They did months and months and months of work and research. They didn't have to stop and cover a hurricane. They didn't have to stop and cover some kind of police action. They didn't have to stop and do it. They focused on this. And when they did it right. They got so many priests and they got the institution. They connected the priests, which could be singular conduct that the church didn't know anything about. They connected the Pope down to everything that came down to how to handle them and how they did handle them. So they indicted not only the pedophile priests, but all the co-conspirators all the way to the Vatican. And that was the floodgate that opened, that now I think victims that came forward realize that there's actually a chance somebody might listen to me now.
I apologize once again to all those who have been sexually abused as minors by priests.
This is the scary part, that you have a person in the community that is supposed to be the most honest, helpful, kind, spiritual person in your community, and he's hiding pedophile priests, the most disgusting criminal that a cop can ever encounter is a pedophile. I know, including myself, could not control myself. If I caught some, I don't care if it was a priest or not. I could not control my rage. But somehow the Catholic Church has put fear in the general public that they cannot be held accountable for this. And I think the Boston Globe changed that and said, yes, you can. You're not above man's laws. You don't have any authority in America. You follow our laws first. Your laws in the church have no relevance to child rape. A lot of people they kind of wonder just exactly how this went down. You know, well, the Boston Globe, because they took their time and they didn't try to rush out with one article about 4 priests. This is the problem across the country. They'd have a pedophile priest and somebody would get some tidbit of information. They would publish it and the church would counter it and then counter it and counter it. And they would actually attack it until that person was told, stand down, you can't prove anymore. So the Boston Globe exposed the policies and the practice of how they are taking these pedophile priests and moving them around like chess pieces, not caring that they're taking a pedophile priest that just raped a dozen boys in one parish, moving them to some innocent place, and then this public welcoming the new priest, then all of a sudden they have a bunch of raped children.
I can tell you that it wasn't a pleasant thing. It was something that I don't like to remember, but I can remember it in pretty much every detail.
The worst part, we don't know how many are dead. We don't know how many committed suicide. We don't know how many died of a drug overdose. We don't know how many have become pedophiles themselves. The Boston Globe begged everybody to ask, how many of you are pedophiles? Why would you cover up for somebody raping a child repeatedly for years? Nobody would come forward and state this unless it was true, because for them it is humiliating. They allowed somebody to do this to them repeatedly, but how they did it was the craft work of a pedophile. They know how to groom, create guilt, they create power and control, and they turn it on the victim. So one, nobody would believe you. I'm more powerful. I'm older. I'm smarter. I'm a priest. There is no way they're going to believe you. If you come forward, you know, you're going to hell. The fear of God and the gift of God is used constantly in this scenario. It's repugnant in what they did. You know, there's been an expression used, a few bad apples. That's about the last thing it was, is a few bad apples. I think the better way to put it is we've got a few good apples. And that's about it. You know, when we ask about how much money the church has spent, we'll never know, because the ones that are public record are X amount. And then when they settle a case outside of court, they have a non-disclosure clause. So the victim can't tell anybody that they were paid off and how much they got, or else that money reverts. Then there's secret payoffs. Then there's other kinds of payoffs. Jobs, positions, cash, consideration, who knows what. So no, we don't ever know. But if you look at just what they have paid off in civil suits, billions. Now we have all the victims, you have commissions, you have popes declaring, oh, I didn't know about this, and now we're never gonna tolerate this again. And this is the joke. I mean, this is really a joke. By the time 2005 rolls around, the Boston Globe article is set in concrete, and we have prosecutions, and we have civil suits, and we have thousands of priests all over the country. If you see the movie Spotlight at the end in the credits, they list all the cities that had investigations that started because of Boston. The Pope claims that I didn't know. Well, we're never going to let this happen again. Well, Pope Benedict becomes Pope in 2005, breaks open again. 3 decades of abuse, thousands of children. Well, I guess I forgot about that one. Well, I guess we should have told you about that one. You got to remember that when Boston Globe came out, the demand was you release all the information you have on all these priests. The Catholic Church will only release what they get caught with. They will give you nothing more. That's all you're going to get. They have mock commissions, SNAP, the Survivors Network of people abused by priests. That's an international group of people. I think there's thousands of people that are ex-victims that are in this. They just walked away from it because it's just mouth service. They're just having some commission that does nothing, will do nothing. So if you really want to know how the Catholic Church operates, 2002, the Boston Globe comes out. More scandals come out in the interim in early 2000. Now in 2018, we have the Pennsylvania scandal come out, a grand jury, 300 priests, 1,000 victims, the people that thought, well, we got them at the Boston Globe. Any moron would clean up your act. Get rid of pedophile priests before they get caught. Get rid of the people you know. You don't have to tell us, just get rid of them. Nope, not the Catholic Church. I'm not going to give up anything that you don't catch me with. There was 252 priests that have been charged with some criminal offense against children, and only 100 have done prison time. We don't have to try to see this on a global scale. Let's just take Boston. 87 pedophile priests. Let's just say that each one of them has 10 counts. That's 870 counts. The statute of limitations kept the lion's share of them away from the law. This is why I say there cannot be a statute of limitations for this kind of crime.
Pope Francis is determined to make the Church a model for the whole world in the handling of the abuse of minors.
Are there good priests? Yeah, of course there is. There's a lot of good priests, no doubt in my mind. Don't get me wrong. This is not an indictment of the entire group that call themselves priests. But I don't believe the Catholic Church is ever going to come to any kind of agreement that they were wrong about anything. To them, it's a few priests that went sideways, a few people that got into our hierarchy. It's not our Catholic Church. They are never going to give up the ghost on this. They are not going to admit anything. And the only way that you're going to be able to do anything is to pass laws that actually attack their conduct specifically and criminally. And you need to actually go after the hierarchy, not the lonely priest. You're not going to get anywhere. They are an island all unto themselves. They have their own country. And it isn't about religion and it isn't about faith. It's about the richest corporation in the world.